Let's get analysis now from our panel. Jesse Weber is NewsNation's chief legal analyst and host of the Jesse Weber Live Show. Jim Trusty is a former Justice Department prosecutor and former attorney for President Trump. And Mick Mulvaney is a NewsNation political contributor who also served as White House chief of staff in Trump's first term. Great to have all of you here. So, Jesse, I'll start with you. President Clinton has a long history of inappropriate behavior with women. He was asked today several pointed questions about those photos showing him in a hot tub with Jeffrey Epstein and a woman whose face is redacted. This cannot have been very comfortable for him.
No, it was a day of a lot of difficult and very uncomfortable questions. But remember, at the end of the day, this may end with him. There might not be more to go with the Clintons. Remember, he has cover here. He has cover in a number of ways, and I'm curious to see if this was explored. A lot of the communications with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the conduit for this relationship, were Doug Band, his former aide. Remember, his communications, his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was years before Epstein was even indicted in 2006 and before the sweetheart plea deal in 2008. So I'm very curious to see the way he answered questions, what specific questions were asked of him, when those deposition tapes are ultimately released. But at the end of the day, it seems that the answers that they were getting were not to say that Clinton engaged in any kind of criminal wrongdoing or had knowledge of it, but maybe it's more about what was Epstein after, what was he doing, and now getting the accountant or lawyers to come in, that may be the next piece of this puzzle to understand what Epstein's network was about.
Yeah, important to also note that Epstein was a frequent visitor to the White House when President Clinton was in office. I'm sure he was asked about that as well. Jim, the former president is telling the House Oversight Committee that his, quote, brief acquaintance with Jeffrey Epstein ended before his crimes came to light. Years, he said. He says, I saw nothing and I did nothing wrong. He was reportedly more compliant in the session today with the congressman answering questions than the former First Lady and former Secretary of State was yesterday, who reportedly seems at times exasperated to be answering questions about someone she says she's never even met.
Yeah, well, I mean, that leaves out that Miss Maxwell was at Chelsea Clinton's wedding, which is kind of an amazing moment.
In fairness, she was a +1 of a guest. She wasn't invited herself.
Yeah, she's a hell of a +1. But look, yeah. I mean, I think the funniest part about Hillary's testimony is not her anger or her constant denials. It's that horrible moment in a marriage where the wife tells somebody like a police officer, you better talk to him. Okay, if you're him, that's a horrible moment. She did that probably dozens of times yesterday. So it really kind of queued it up for a conversation that's much more meaningful with President Clinton. And look, I think in the absence of a blue dress with DNA, you're not going to get some sort of tearful admission or anything close to it. The interesting thing to me, and I suppose we'll know soon enough, is whether or not there's anything from these recent dumps of material, videos, photos, anything else besides hot tub pictures that could really throw Clinton off his game. In other words, something none of us has seen yet, but that staffers are able to find that really rattles him. And I suspect it didn't happen, but that's about your only chance of getting something that's going to be particularly substantive from Bill Clinton. And the last thing I would just say is, obviously it was before Epstein was charged, but that doesn't mean that the criminal activity wasn't taking place on a daily basis back then. So there's a little bit of a Sergeant Schultz, I don't know what you're talking about, that even the pictures suggest he'd have a little bit better knowledge of than he was telling Comer's committee.
I don't know. The pictures don't show him committing any crimes. The pictures show him doing things that I certainly wouldn't want my husband to be doing. And I think I'm speaking for pretty much every woman in America when I say that. Mick, I was struck by something that President Clinton said, quote, even with 20/20 hindsight, I saw nothing that ever gave me pause. That's pretty incredible. Like, nothing in Epstein's behavior gave you like a vibe?
I mean, let's realize who we're talking about. By the way, I have to give a shout out to Jim Trusty for using the Sergeant Schultz reference. I actually get that, Jim. I'm old enough to get that line.
Thank you.
Look, it's Bill Clinton. It's Bill Clinton. His family motto is deny, deny, deny. I didn't look at this today as being the potential source for anything substantive, to Jim's point. Bill Clinton was not going to go, oh, my goodness, now that I'm under oath, let me tell you about all the crimes that I committed. That was never, ever going to happen. The significance here, I think, Elizabeth, was something that a lot of folks are missing, and that is that a former president of the United States sat against his will under oath to testify to the United States House of Representatives. That has never happened before. Presidents have testified before, but it was voluntarily and under not unusual circumstances like this was. The precedent is set. And I got to tell you, I can only imagine the White House watched this today and figured at some point in the future, they may be sitting there as well. Donald Trump may be sitting there as well in a future Democrat-controlled House answering questions under threat of going to jail if you don't show up. For me, that is why today was so important, not what Bill Clinton said or didn't say or whether or not he actually told the truth.
Mick, as always, you got right to my next question. You read my mind because we have Democrats coming out to the microphone today and saying, well, we now have the Clinton rule, which means a former president can be subpoenaed and deposed against his will. As you just pointed out, there is precedent. You know, we had President Trump today saying, I don't like seeing this. I don't like seeing him deposed. I like Bill Clinton. President Trump surely has to recognize the danger in this precedent. Mick.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, well, how could you not? How could anybody running for president or thinking about being president not? I don't think there's a chance at all. And I'd be curious to know what the other two think about this. There's no chance Donald Trump comes down as the sitting president. That's simply not going to happen. That's a separation of powers problem between the legislative and the executive branch. But the day he's out of office, I think it's going to be a part of a conversation in a future Democrat-controlled House. By the way, similar to sitting cabinet secretaries. We haven't seen a sitting cabinet secretary sit yet.
No, but we might.
But as soon as any member of the cabinet leaves, they're in the same category as Hillary Clinton and Alex Acosta, who testified earlier, and Bill Barr. So no, there's the precedential value today, I think, is what the history books will talk about more than anything.
Jesse, here's the problem. If simply being mentioned in the files, if being in photographs that are in the files is enough alone to be subpoenaed, that leads to what Mick just brought up. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is in the files. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was at Epstein Island. There are photographs that were put out, pulled back, put back out after an outcry ensued, and Democrats are loudly calling for him to be subpoenaed to testify next.
It's an incredibly fair question, and it'll be, if you really have nothing more to add to it, if there's nothing to hide, why not just come and say something? Look, being under subpoena, testifying, it's obviously carries legal consequences. And I will tell you what I think is really interesting about it, and Mick hit it upon it as well, is yes, if you're in the files, it's one thing, but why are we seeing resignations? Why are we seeing investigations out in the UK? Why are we seeing investigations out in Norway? Because there's something more. It's something more about it. Now, I will tell you, the president has covered today. What did President Clinton say? He never told me anything that would suggest that he did anything wrong with Epstein. I think that helps him a lot. But I agree with Mick. You're not going to see President Trump sitting for any kind of deposition now. But in a few years from now, is there going to be an appetite for this? I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. The fact in the matter is that we are having this. Why did this not happen 2 years ago, 3 years ago? It's because of all the pressure that was put on for transparency that we're finally getting some answers. I'm not saying criminal investigations or criminal charges, but the fact that we're getting more pieces of the puzzle now, that's the win in all of this.
Jim, I was struck by two things, actually, that Republican committee members said when they came to the microphones a short time ago. One of them was, we want to find out how this guy got his money. We're going to subpoena, that's what we're doing next. And yet not a single Republican member of this committee showed up to Les Wexner's deposition last week. Why not? Les Wexner was the one person most responsible, for making Jeffrey Epstein a rich man, for enabling Jeffrey Epstein to buy an island and buy a plane that was later dubbed the Lolita Express. Why didn't they show up for Les Wexner's deposition if they're that concerned with tracking and following the money?
Yeah, you're suggesting that maybe politicians are engaged in street theater in the Epstein case? That's a revelation. We should probably alert all other medias to break in. No, I mean, look, I think it's a fair point. And there is obviously street theater going on, including the calls for this committee to call the sitting president to the stand for this stuff. Look, I mean, to me, it goes to the heart of something that's bothered me from the beginning. I don't think that this country should make a habit, even in a case where supposedly we all care about the victims, and I think that's actually a pretty small amount of the people that pursue this case. where we just open up prosecutor files, take unvetted information, do a tally on how many times names show up, and then just create this kind of star chamber attitude of like, let's just drill everybody. And look, I think there's a lot of room for moral distaste of what people did to cozy up to Epstein and his ability to get into these circles of industry and politics. But this precedent, I hope it's not a precedent. You know, this idea that we're all going to be armchair prosecutors and look at information, some of which is like, you know, in the body of the report says this is false information, and we're just taking it all as an endless chase for evidence. So not a big fan of the whole process, but I'm not going to vouch for the intents of the politicians on top of that.
Yeah, well, and this is one of the few times when it's bipartisan. We had both Republicans and Democrats cozying up to a very vile, despicable guy. Jim Trusty, Mick Mulvaney, Jesse Weber, have a great weekend. I'm sure we will be talking about this when we see the transcripts and the videos, which will emerge in the coming days.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.